We're going to discuss the most valuable cards of the 1970s. Taking as a group, we're going to look at which cards one can make the most profits from in terms of cards that were issued by Topps 1970 to 1979. And most of these cards, as you'll recognize, are rookie cards of players that made the Hall of Fame. So you probably recognize players like Bert Blyleven, Mike Schmidt, George Brett, Robin Yount, Carlton Fisk, Ozzie Smith, Dennis Eckersley, Dave Winfield, Paul Molitor, Alan Trammell, Eddie Murray, and also Gary Carter. But we're also going to find out that there are some cards for players that did not make the Hall of Fame that also carry value and perhaps have potential value in the future should they make the Hall of Fame. Players like Thurman Munson, Dusty Baker, Don Baylor, Steve Garvey, as well as Dwight Evans and Jim Rice. All these players have potential to kind of take in considerable amount of cash once those cards are put up for sale. Now, beside the rookie cards, there are also other cards of well-known stars that are in the Hall of Fame, that these are later cards, but still carry a lot of value as they kind of existed during the 70s. Certainly, those cards would include the Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, Roberto Clemente, many of the Nolan Ryan cards, as well as the rookie for Andre Dawson and second-year cards for Eddie Murray and Paul Molitor. So we'll take as a group each player, most of them, as I say, are the Hall of Fame, and look at their cards that existed in the 70s that carry value. And on the top of this list is going to be the Nolan Ryan cards. He became a rookie late in the 60s, and you see his cards extend throughout the 70s, from the 1970 to 1979 cards, some holding more value than others, but all kind of having impressive profits over the course of time. So Nolan Ryan is a card that is valued and one that one probably has in their collection, and it's very sellable at these current times. Then you have stars that are probably rookies in the 50s and 60s, but their last years are during the 70s, as you see Al Kaline and also the Ernie Banks, as well as Willie Mays ended his career in the 70s, and also you have Roberto Clemente. So they go from 70 to 73 on these players. Then the Hank Aaron cards, kind of extending from 1970 to 1976. And we're going to review many cards that are in this particular decade that are of value for Hank Aaron. Bob Gibson, a Hall of Famer. His cards extend to the 70s from 1970 to 1976, carry value, as well as the Carl Yastrzemskis from 1970, and he existed throughout the entire decade to 1979. Tony Oliva, a player that just recently made the Hall of Fame, he will extend into the 70s card up to 1977. You have, of course, Pete Rose, has numerous cards in the 70s because he, of course, broke several records, so other cards besides just the base set, but his cards extend from 1970 through 1979, and many carry considerable value, as well as Johnny Bench, part of that Big Red Machine with Pete Rose, and you see that he has cards that extend also through the 70s. Tom Seaver, player who became a rookie late in the 60s. His cards extend from 1970 to 1979, and many carry value, as well as Willie Stargell extends throughout the 70s. And also Jim Palmer, Hall of Famer pitcher for the Orioles. His cards extend throughout the 70s. And also Rod Carew, who is a Hall of Famer, and his cards also carry value all above and beyond the rookie card. And of course, Reggie Jackson, who was a rookie in the late 60s, 69 Topps card. He has many cards in this particular decade, and his base cards extend throughout, as well as Thurman Munson. Now, as I mentioned that this is a player who did not and probably will not make the Hall of Fame because of his shortened career, which was tragically ended in a plane crash. But he has appeal to the collectors because of his being a Yankee, as well as his dedicated play and abilities, certainly as a Golden Glove winner. But his cards do extend throughout the 70s. Then we have Mike Schmidt, whose rookie card began in 1973 and extend throughout the 70s and carry value, certainly his rookie card. You also have the two players that kind of made the 1975 top set, and that being George Brett and Robin Yount. And they have, of course, above and beyond just these base set cards, have many cards within these sets in terms of accomplishments. So we're going to look at the particular sets during this decade and take them by year, and you'll see that beyond just the Hall of Famer cards, there also are numerous rookie cards as well as cards of interest. So we begin, of course, with the 1970 cards, and that what's interesting about this particular year is that team cards reappear during this time. Milwaukee Brewers are still called the Seattle Pilots on the 1970 cards, as well as playoff cards are first introduced because now there's a 4-division alignment. It's not just the National League and American League. There are 4 divisions, and so there are playoff cards for both divisions. We'll see in the Sparky Anderson card, it's his first card as a manager, and you will recognize that it has been airbrushed. It's the first regular issue of Topps with actually containing no mantle cards. Mets and Cubs cards are high in demand in this 1970 set. And there are several interesting inserts that can carry value, such as the scratch-offs, the posters, and booklets. So when we look at the 1970 cards of interest and we look at the rookies, we've got Bill Buckner, probably more famous for kind of flubbing a ground ball that lost them the series, but still a card that carries value. You'll see that you have the 1970 rookie stars of the Athletics, and most renowned would be Vida Blue, not in the Hall of Fame, but certainly well known as a pitcher, certainly during their heydays in the World Series, and also their catcher, Gene Tenace. And again, we have the rookie card of Thurman Munson, which was available in 1970, another rookie card by a player, Chuck Manuel. And there is the famous Sparky Anderson card, which is airbrushed when it's his first manager card. We have the Seattle Pilots, which basically become the Milwaukee Brewers, but they're still listed in this set as the Seattle Pilots. And then, as we say, we have the playoff series. We have the Orioles and the Twins, who will eventually go on to play the Mets in the '69 World Series. And then we have the 1971 Topps cards, and those cards of interest we'll look at briefly. And you have what is kind of unique to the set is you have player action photos, which we'll show briefly. And then you have the backs, which feature a photo of each player over an iconic green background, which is kind of unique to the Topps brand this year. It has black borders, and this black border made the card susceptible to damage, things like chipping and fraying. And because of it, it's very hard to get cards of this particular year and set that are mint or even near mint because of the chipping. So they become more valuable because they're less available in terms of good condition. As you can see here, many individuals will try to overcome this by using a Sharpie or something to blacken the edges, but this can be detected by individuals, and there's certain posts on YouTube that explain how to catch this kind of fraudulence to the card. And there are also inserts in this set. We have coins and tattoos that, if they're in good condition, carry some value. So here is those cards of interest in the 1971. So we said with the action cards, and you can certainly see the second year of Thurman Munson action card where he's an all-star rookie. And then you have the card on the back, and you see in the iconic green and the picture of the player on that card. You have the Steve Garvey rookie card, as well as the George Foster and the Burt Blyleven, as well as the Dusty Baker and Don Baylor. Dusty Baker getting renowned this year as manager for the World Series Astros. You have other players that are not in the Hall of Fame, but basically were high quality players during their era, and that being Dave Concepcion as well as Ken Singleton. And then you have the Hall of Famer Ted Simmons. So lots of interesting cards to collect during this particular year. And again, probably of more value if they're in good condition. As you can see, even in these cards here, there's sort of chipping on the edges and corners. So 1972, cards of interest. We will find that it's a psychedelic design that is one of the most divisive ever. I know it's kind of like the 70s were that psychedelic era and disco and so forth, and you can see the cards kind of reflect that. This particular set is interesting because at 787 cards, and you can see the checklist. It is one of the largest top sets to date. So had lots and lots of cards. And it also had boyhood photos of the stars, which is the first time they released not only the star player, but what they basically photos of them when they were younger individuals. There are inaction cards. And as we see here, we have the rookie cards of Carlton Fisk, but also a star player, Cecil Cooper. And then we have the Ron Say rookie card and Ben Ogilvy. Then we have kind of unique cards, as you see this kind of Billy Connors, almost comical, that the way it's kind of photographed, it looks like he has a halo over his head, kind of concomitant with him playing for the Angels. And then as you'll notice in this Tigers Billy Martin card, he's kind of through his hand gestures making a profanity, which was caught on film, which makes it somewhat different. And then you have the traded card for Joe Morgan, which was actually a high number, around 752, and where it was traded from the Padres to the Reds and became part of that Big Red Machine. And as I mentioned, you have the Boyer cards. There's several of them in this particular set, and one of them is a Tom Seaver, and you see him as a young baseball player. And then you have inaction cards, which have a lot of action going on during a particular play of certain players, not always a Hall of Famer or superstar, but still kind of a eye-catching in terms of the action. Now we look at this 1973 Topps cards of interest, and we will say that this card set now is 660 cards, which is one of the smallest card sets of the 70s. And the last vintage Topps set to be released in multiple series. So it was kind of released one and then another and so forth, where this kind of halted after the 1973 set. You'll also see manager cards. You'll see all-time leader cards. And yet, in terms of its design and appearance, it was considered one of the ugliest Topps cards ever, and that's to be determined by each individual. But these are the cards, and you have the rookie outfielders, as we mentioned before, that Dwight Evans is not in the Hall of Fame, but possibly in the future could be, but a very collectible player, as well as we talked about Mike Schmidt, a very valuable rookie card. Rich Gossage is in the Hall of Fame. Buddy Bell was a kind of a star player, as well as Bob Boone, who actually had a father who played, as well as sons who played in the game. And then continuing on in terms of these cards of interest, you have the manager cards like the Leo DeRocha. And sometimes you'll see in the coaches, you'll see actually Hall of Famers, and these become Hall of Fame collectible cards in this manager series. You have the action photos, and they continue on to the boyhood stars of the future. You see Gaylord Perry, Hall of Famer, and him as a boy. And then you have these all-time leaders. And so you have the all-time home run leaders, which features Babe Ruth and Hank Aaron. Then you have total base leaders, which you have Hank Aaron. So very interesting year, not the most picturesque cards, but nonetheless, a lot of interesting cards contained within this set. We move on to 1974 cards of interest, and what we immediately see when we look at the checklist, that the first 6 cards are actually Hank Aaron. This is basically in tribute to him being the all-time home run king, as well as he has several cards that kind of are kind of older cards pictured on them of the series of Topps that goes from around 1970 all the way to 1969, kind of a reflection of his past cards. So kind of interesting in terms of cards to collect in this set. The final regular issue cards of Hall of Famers like Luis Aparicio, Orlando Cepeda, and Al Kaline. So now we're going to look, and we're going to spend a little time on this later, in terms of the last cards of each player, last major league playing card of each player, which kind of carries some value, as well as the first rookie card. So we look at other cards of interest in this 1974 set, and we see the rookie card of Dane Winfield, player who didn't make the Hall of Fame, but is kind of a star and collectible, is Dave Parker, as well as Ken Griffey's dad, Ken Griffey Jr.'s dad, Ken Griffey. Bucky Dent became a well-known player and also manager. You got a pitcher for the Angels that got a lot of recognition during his days in baseball, that being Frank Tanana. And then you have, as I said, the last cards of the playing years of these particular players, which are Al Kaline, Orlando Cepeda, and Luis Aparicio, all of which made the Hall of Fame. Moving on to the 1975 series, a lot of people think this was the most attractive set that Topps ever came out with. You see the kind of multicolored and kind of very kind of distinct photos. And we talked about the two key rookie players that hold a lot of value in terms of this particular set, that being George Brett and Robin Yount. We also have the Hall of Famer Gary Carter, and then other players that didn't make the Hall of Fame, but kind of have a lot of recognition and star power, and that being Jim Rice, as well as Fred Lynn, both of the Boston Red Sox. Then we have a very interesting group of cards that kind of gives tribute, kind of archives the most valuable player awards and their rookie years, or their cards of that particular year that they won the MVP. And of course, this would be a mantle card, and 56 and 62, but all of the years pretty much going on to 1975, they will have all of the most valuable players that were elected into the honor. And then you have a lot of interesting highlight cards. You have Nolan Ryan, and you have the Hank Aaron's, and there's other highlight cards throughout this particular set that are interesting, collectible, as well as you'll get those star players and Hall of Famers. And then we have another rookie card of Keith Hernandez, who was again a star player and recognizable, and carries some value as a rookie card. Well, let's move on to 1976 cards of interest. And again, it's always about the rookies. So you got Dennis Eckersley, a Hall of Famer. You got Ron Goodry, a star player, not in the Hall of Fame, but a profitable card to have in your collection. The Willie Randolph, who was a star for the New York Yankees. And then you have the record breakers. And here we have again Hank Aaron being listed, as well as all-time stars like Babe Ruth. And then you have the second-year card of Ted Simmons. You have Rick Miller, who took the place of Fred Lynn, who was supposed to be the superstar of the Red Sox while he was out. Jim Rice's second card, and Joe Torre's last card, when he kind of moves into the position of manager and starts his career as a manager for the New York Mets. We move on to the 1977 Topps cards, and we see that we have turned back the clock. So we'll look at players from years ago that are kind of spoken of and described on these cards, like the Yastrzemski Triple Crown. Then you'll have Big Brothers, where you'll have players in the Major League Baseball that are brothers, like George Brett and Ken Brett. And then you also have record breakers, as here we have George Brett. Other cards of interest that we have in this particular year is the Bruce Sutter, Hall of Famer, Andre Dawson. You also have Dale Murphy, Jim Gantner, and also Bump Willis, who was the son of Maury Wills. And you have players like Denny Martinez, as well as kind of an interesting card that is the Mark Friedrich rookie card, which we'll talk about in the future, but kind of an interesting player who had a very short career. You have a star player in Jack Clark, and maybe even Lee Mazzilli, as well as the rookie card for Gary Templeton. And then we're back to the manager cards, where we will have other coaches and so forth that are of interest for collectors. Moving on to 1978, we have the Hall of Famer like Eddie Murray, and you also have this very kind of really nice coincidence that you have two Hall of Famers on the same card, that being Paul Molitor and Alan Trammell. And then we have the second-year card of Dale Murphy, which is kind of confusing because it's kind of like rookie catchers, but yet, as we mentioned, that rookie card is the year before. You have a star player that is collectible in Jack Morris. And then you have the team cards, and you have the Yankees, which is always a collectible card. Anything Yankees is popular. Then era cards, and you can see in this Bump Willis card right down towards the bottom, there's a ring, and they corrected for that. So Bump Willis gets some recognition for being on an era card. And then you have the record breakers, and you've got Brooks Robinson and Pete Rose. And then you also go back to the manager cards, which continue to be popular. And here you have kind of in the early career of the manager as a player, and then later as a manager. So kind of an interesting group of cards for one's collection. And then you have the Red Sox also team card, and these are somewhat value. 79, this is the last year of this particular decade. You have an Ozzie Smith, probably was the key card of that particular collection. Rookie card, then you have all-time record holders, and you have numerous ones of these, but it's interesting to see the Hank Aaron and Roger Maris together in terms of home runs. Again, Bump Wills has another era card, and you can see that though the pictures are the same, the logo down below, one's either for the Blue Jays and the other one's for the Rangers, so that would be considered kind of an era card. And then you have the second year of the Hall of Famer Eddie Murray, the second year of the Hall of Famer Paul Molitor, and even though he didn't make the Hall of Fame, you have second year of Dale, actually the third year of Dale Murphy, and the second year of Dennis Eckersley, Hall of Famer. So we take that, and now we're going to look, as I said before, that somewhat in collecting cards, it's kind of, if you can't seem to afford the whole series of that particular player, but would like to have something as a kind of a memory of that player, to get their first and last card. So we kind of always talk about the rookies, but that these 70 sets hold a lot of the last year for Hall of Famers, which are kind of neat collectibles and to kind of sort and put together. So we have Frank Robinson, and then his last year being 75. And then we have the Joe Morgan last year, and Louis Aparicio, as well as Brooks Robinson. And we already talked about Joe Torre and his last card as a player. And then he moves on to manager. And we have Gaylord Perry, as well as Rollie Fingers and Harlan Killebrew's last card, Steve Carlton, Ferguson Jenkins, Ron Sandow, and Billy Williams. Going on, Willie McCovey, Juan Marichal, Orlando Cepeda we talked about before, Lou Brock, Jim Hunter, ending his career as a Yankee, and then Joe Niekro, ending his career as a Twin. And moving on, we have Bobby Cox. Again, these are manager cards, but you have his manager card, as well as Sparky Anderson and Tony Perez, as well as the great Ted Williams, and his last card being his manager for the Texas Rangers. And then finally, and we'll end with this, is we have the Jim Bunning Hall of Famer in his last year in 1971, and then the manager Earl Weaver, the Hall of Famer as a manager, and Walter Austin, also Hall of Famer as a manager, his last manager card, and Gil Hodges, who just recently got into the Hall of Fame as a player, but more maybe even known as a manager, and his last manager card. So if you're interested in learning additional information about the baseball card industry, the history of baseball cards, profiting and investing in baseball cards, or ideas to bring the fun back into collecting, I would welcome you to follow us below, and feel free to view our library of YouTube videos. We have several that are in the archives. And please take a moment, if you would, to hit the subscribe button. Also, check out our eBay store, where we have available for sale many of the cards shown in these videos.